I still remember the sound of the rain that night. It was pouring heavily, beating against the windows of the small apartment I used to share with my son, Ethan, and his wife, Clara. I stood by the doorway holding my old coat close to my chest, my suitcase sitting by my feet. My hands trembled not because of the cold, but because I couldn't believe what was happening. My own son, my only child, was telling me to leave his house. "Mom, we need some space," Ethan said, not meeting my eyes. His tone was careful, like he was speaking to a stranger he didn't want to offend. Clara stood behind him, arms crossed, her expression sharp as a blade. "You haven't paid rent in months," she added coldly. "We can't keep supporting you." Those words sliced through me. Rent? Support? I had spent my entire life working 2 jobs to raise Ethan after his father died. I never imagined the day would come when I'd have to pay to live under the same roof as my own son. I lost my job only a month ago. I had been working at the library for over 30 years before it closed down due to budget cuts. At 68, no one wanted to hire an old woman like me. I tried, believe me, I did, but every application ended the same. "We'll keep your resume on file." I thought Ethan would understand, that he'd give me a little time until I got back on my feet. But instead he told me to leave. "Please, Ethan," I whispered, trying to hold back tears. "It's just temporary. I'll find something soon." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Mom, Clara and I talked about this. We can't keep covering your expenses. It's not fair to us." Fair. That word echoed in my mind. Was it fair that I gave up my youth, my dreams, everything to raise him? Was it fair that I skipped meals to pay for his college tuition, that I worked night shifts so he could sleep peacefully? But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I nodded, holding back the storm inside me. I picked up my small suitcase, put on my coat, and walked out into the rain. Clara shut the door before I could even say goodbye. The streets were dark and empty. The rain soaked through my clothes as I dragged my suitcase along the sidewalk. I didn't know where to go. My sister lived 2 states away, and my few friends were either gone or in nursing homes. I sat on a bench at the bus stop, shivering and crying quietly, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. Then I noticed a young man sitting across from me. He wore a hooded jacket and looked barely 20. He glanced at me a few times, then spoke softly. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I wiped my tears and forced a smile. "I'll be fine, dear. Just a rough night." He nodded, hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket. A granola bar. "Here. You should eat." I stared at it for a moment, touched by the small kindness. "Thank you," I whispered. That night I found a cheap motel and spent the last of my savings for a single room. I didn't sleep much. My heart was heavy, not just from the pain of being abandoned, but from something deeper. A feeling that maybe I had failed as a mother. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was tired, lined with years of hard work and sacrifice. But behind those wrinkles I saw something else, a spark. I had been through worse in life. Losing my husband when Ethan was only 8. Working 3 jobs at once just to survive. I had built everything from nothing before, and I could do it again. So I packed my bag, left the motel, and decided to start over. I walked to the employment center downtown, where a kind woman named Grace helped me fill out some applications. Most places didn't want someone my age, but Grace noticed something on my resume and raised an eyebrow. "You worked in archives and digital cataloging?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "For over 3 decades." She smiled. "You might be perfect for something I just heard about. It's a temporary position, but it's with a large historical research company. They're looking for someone who understands old documentation systems." I didn't get my hopes up, but I agreed to the interview. When I arrived at the company the next day, I was surprised to see how big it was. Marble floors, glass walls, people rushing everywhere in suits. I felt out of place in my old cardigan and worn shoes. But when I met the head researcher, Dr. Collins, something unexpected happened. As he read through my file, his eyes widened. "Wait a moment. You're Margaret Thompson? The one who developed the dual indexing system in the late 90s? I nodded slowly. "Yes, that was me." He looked at me like he'd just met a legend. "Your system revolutionized how small-town libraries managed their data before digital conversion. We still reference your work today." I blinked, shocked. I hadn't thought about that old project in decades. Back then, I was just trying to make my small library more efficient. I never knew it had spread that far. Dr. Collins stood up and extended his hand. "Mrs. Thompson, we'd be honored to have you on our team." Tears filled my eyes as I shook his hand. For the first time in months, I felt seen, not as a burden, not as a failure, but as someone who mattered. Little did I know this new job would change everything. It would uncover secrets about my past that even my son didn't know. And it would teach him the hardest lesson of his life. Because one day soon Ethan would come face to face with who I really was. And by then it would be too late to undo what he had done. At first, I thought this job would simply be a way to earn some money and rebuild my life quietly. But fate had other plans for me. The historical research company I joined, Heritage Archives, wasn't just any firm. They specialized in recovering and preserving forgotten records, war archives, old business documents, historical letters, and even the personal records of influential families. It was a place where history whispered through every paper, every photograph, every dusty folder. My work was simple. Review and digitally organize decades-old files, labeling and cross-referencing them for the researchers. It was tedious work to most, but to me it felt like coming home. Every document I touched carried a story, a fragment of someone's life, a soldier writing to his mother, a woman's lost inheritance, a family's untold legacy. Weeks passed and I grew close to Dr. Collins. He treated me with respect and often asked my opinion on complex indexing issues. One afternoon, while we were going through an old archive box from the late 1980s, he looked at me thoughtfully. "Margaret, you know, you're more than just an employee here. You've made a significant mark in this field. You deserve recognition." I smiled faintly. "I'm just happy to be useful again." But soon, something unexpected happened. One of the company's senior clients, a large real estate group, had requested access to old municipal property records from the city, records dating back decades. I was assigned to oversee the cataloging of these documents. As I went through the files, I found something strange: several properties listed under a trust name I recognized faintly, the T&M Foundation. It took me a moment to realize what those initials stood for. Thompson and Mason. That was the foundation my late husband, Richard Mason, and I had started together when he was alive. It was meant to fund small community projects and literacy programs. But after his sudden death, I thought the foundation had been dissolved due to lack of funds. Yet here it was, still active, still receiving money, and not just small amounts. The records showed transactions worth hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. My breath caught in my throat. How was that possible? I hadn't seen a cent of that money since Richard's death. Curiosity turned to confusion, and confusion turned to suspicion. I dug deeper, pulling up tax filings, account numbers, and trustee documents. My hands began to shake as I read a name listed as the current trustee, Ethan Mason. My son. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Ethan had taken over the foundation years ago, and from what I could see, he had been withdrawing money from it regularly. Money that was meant for charity, for community work, for people like us. I felt sick. My stomach churned as the pieces started falling into place. When Richard passed away, I was grieving and overwhelmed. I had trusted Ethan, then only 21, to handle the legal paperwork. I never checked the accounts again, assuming everything had been shut down. But instead, he had turned it into his personal treasure chest. For a long time I just sat there, numb. The son I raised to be kind and honest had been using his father's legacy for greed, and all while letting me live in despair. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept remembering how he looked at me the night he kicked me out, with that cold, distant stare. And now I understood why. He didn't just see me as a burden. He saw me as a threat. The next morning, I went to Dr. Collins and requested permission to make certified copies of the foundation files for further analysis. He agreed without hesitation, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. Over the next few days I compiled everything, every transaction, every document, every signature. I even found emails between Ethan and a real estate broker, discussing property transfers under shell companies. It wasn't just moral failure, it was criminal. My hands trembled as I printed the last page. I knew this was something big. But before I could decide what to do, I received a phone call that nearly made me drop the papers. It was Clara. Margaret, she said, her tone surprisingly soft. Ethan isn't doing well. He's been under a lot of stress lately. I think he regrets what happened. Maybe you should come over. Just to talk. For a moment my heart softened. Despite everything, the thought of seeing my son again made my chest ache with longing. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a part of him that cared. I agreed to visit that evening. When I arrived, the air between us was thick and heavy. Ethan looked thinner, tired, like the guilt had been eating away at him. Clara hovered in the kitchen, pretending to busy herself. Mom, he began quietly, I'm sorry for what happened. I shouldn't have said those things. I didn't know how to handle everything. I stared at him for a long time, my heart torn between anger and love. Ethan, I whispered, I raised you to be better than this. I would have given you everything, but you already took what wasn't yours. He frowned. What are you talking about? I slowly pulled a folder from my bag and placed it on the table. The foundation. Your father's foundation. The one you've been using for your business ventures. His eyes went wide. For a split second, fear flashed across his face. Then he forced a smile. Mom, I think you're mistaken. That foundation was dissolved years ago. I've seen the records, Ethan. I interrupted, my voice trembling. Every transaction. Every withdrawal. Your signature. Clara froze in the doorway, her expression changing completely. What foundation? She asked sharply. Ethan stammered. It's nothing, Clara. Just some old paperwork. But it was too late. I had already pulled out the evidence. As Clara read through the documents, her face drained of color. You stole money from your own father's foundation, she whispered in disbelief. You lied to me, Ethan. Ethan slammed his hands on the table. You don't understand. That money was sitting there for years doing nothing. I just used it to build something of my own. By destroying your mother's trust in you? I asked softly. By turning your father's dream into your personal account? He glared at me, his voice trembling with frustration. You think you're so righteous, Mom? You don't know what it's like to be under pressure, to try and make something of yourself. I know exactly what it's like, I said, my voice breaking. Because I lived it. Every night I worked overtime so you could go to college, I lived it. Every time I skipped meals so you could have a future, I lived it. And now, you're stealing from your father's name while your own mother sleeps in motels. Silence filled the room. Ethan looked away, his jaw clenched, his eyes glistening. Finally, he whispered, You wouldn't tell anyone, would you? I looked at him with tears streaming down my face. I don't know, Ethan. I honestly don't know anymore. Before he could respond, there was a knock on the door. Clara opened it and froze. Standing there was Dr. Collins holding a briefcase. Mrs. Thompson, he said calmly, we need to talk. The board found something big, and it involves your son. Ethan's face went pale. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about justice. Ethan's eyes darted from me to Dr. Collins, panic spreading across his face. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Clara slowly stepped back, giving Dr. Collins room to enter. The silence in the room was deafening, the kind that made your heartbeat sound louder than your thoughts. Dr. Collins placed his briefcase on the table, his expression grim. Mrs. Thompson, I'm sorry to arrive unannounced, but something urgent came up in our audit process. While cross-verifying the foundation records you flagged, we found multiple inconsistencies, serious ones. The board has decided to involve the authorities. Ethan stood up so quickly his chair toppled over. You can't be serious, he shouted. You can't just show up at my house and accuse me like this. Dr. Collins didn't flinch. Mr. Mason, the documents speak for themselves. The withdrawals, the false signatures, the shell companies, they all trace back to you. Clara covered her mouth, her eyes wide in disbelief. Ethan, is this true? She whispered. I did it for us, he cried, desperation breaking through his voice. For our future. You think I wanted to steal? I needed money to keep the business afloat, to pay the mortgage, to make sure we didn't lose everything. I stared at him, tears burning in my eyes. You had choices, Ethan. You could have come to me. You could have been honest. But instead, you let greed guide you, and you turned your father's dream into a lie. Ethan slammed his fists on the table, his voice trembling with rage. You think you're some saint, Mom? You don't know what it's like to live in my shadow. Everyone always compared me to you. Margaret, the selfless librarian who built something from nothing. Do you have any idea what that felt like? I froze. His words cut deep. I had never imagined that my success, however small it seemed to me, could have made my son feel inferior. Dr. Collins broke the silence. Mr. Mason, this isn't just about feelings. You've committed fraud. If you cooperate, perhaps leniency can be considered. But if you resist, it will only get worse. Ethan's face crumbled. For the first time he looked small, like the boy I once held in my arms, scared and lost. Clara sank into a chair, whispering through tears. How could you do this, Ethan? How could you lie to me? Ethan turned toward me, his voice softening. Mom, please, you can fix this. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding. They'll believe you. You're respected there. You can make this go away. My heart broke into pieces. The son I raised to stand tall was now begging me to lie for him. I can't, Ethan, I said quietly. The truth has to come out. Your father's legacy deserves that. And so do I. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned away, his shoulders trembling. Dr. Collins sighed, nodded respectfully to me, and left, saying that the company would handle the legal side from there. That night I sat alone on a park bench under a dim streetlight, staring at the city skyline. I should have felt victorious, justice was on my side, but instead I felt empty. A mother never truly wins when her child falls. Few weeks passed. Investigations moved quickly. Ethan was charged with embezzlement and fraud. Clara filed for separation, unable to bear the weight of his actions. I visited him once at the holding facility. He sat across from me, his face pale, his eyes hollow. Mom, he whispered. I didn't mean to hurt you. Tears streamed down my face as I took his hand. I know, I said softly. But some lessons can only be learned through pain. He looked down, ashamed. They said I might go to prison. I can't handle that. I'll never survive in there. I squeezed his hand gently. You'll survive because you're stronger than you think. You just forgot who you were for a while. Maybe this will remind you. As I left, I turned back one last time. He looked at me with those same eyes he had as a child, scared, broken, but still my boy. Months went by. I kept working at Heritage Archives, and Dr. Collins eventually promoted me to head consultant for their new program. My story, though painful, began to inspire others in the company. They even published a small article about me in their newsletter titled, The Woman Who Rebuilt Her Legacy. But the story wasn't over yet. One morning I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name written in shaky handwriting. I opened it and felt my breath catch. It was from Ethan. Dear Mom, it began. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. Every night I think about the look on your face when I kicked you out. I see it in my dreams and it breaks me. Prison has changed me. I've had a lot of time to think about Dad, about what he stood for, and about the kind of man I became. I want to make things right somehow. I don't know if I can ever undo what I did, but I'll try. I held the letter to my chest, my tears falling freely. Despite everything, he was still my son. And deep down I had never stopped loving him. Over the next year I wrote back to him regularly. Slowly he began to change. He started reading books on finance ethics, volunteering inside the prison's education program, and mentoring younger inmates. The same boy who once chased money now found purpose in helping others. Then one day I received another letter, shorter this time. Mom, they're releasing me next month. I don't know if you'll want to see me, but I'll be waiting outside the library on the day I get out. The same place you used to take me when I was little. My hands trembled as I read those words. The library, the place where I had built my life, my purpose, and where everything had once begun. The day he was released, I went there early, my heart pounding in my chest. The air was crisp, the sun soft through the morning clouds. I waited by the old stone steps, wondering if he would actually come. Then I saw him. He looked different, thinner, older, humbled. But when his eyes met mine, I saw something familiar. Remorse and love. He walked up slowly, tears in his eyes. Mom, he said in a broken voice. I don't deserve you. I reached out and took his hand. You don't have to deserve me, Ethan. You just have to never forget who you are again. He nodded, crying silently. I want to rebuild everything, Mom. For you. For Dad. For what we lost. And for the first time in a long while I smiled. Then let's start today. But as we stood there, holding hands in front of that old library, something inside me told me the story wasn't done. Because there was one final secret about my past, one even Ethan didn't know. A truth that would change how he saw me forever. For weeks after Ethan's release, we spent quiet afternoons together, rebuilding the fragile bond that once seemed shattered beyond repair. He would come to my small apartment with coffee and fresh flowers, determined to show me he had changed. There was still guilt in his eyes, but there was also something new: humility. He started working at a local community center, helping young adults learn financial literacy. If I can stop even one person from making the same mistakes I did, he said one day, then maybe what I did won't be for nothing. I was proud of him, though the scars of the past still stung. Trust, once broken, takes time to heal. But each day I saw a little more of the boy I raised. The kind-hearted, curious soul who used to read under the blankets with a flashlight when he was 10. Yet deep inside me something was stirring. That secret I had buried for decades, the truth I had hidden even from Ethan, was becoming too heavy to keep inside. And fate, as it often does, forced my hand. One afternoon I received a call from Dr. Collins. Margaret, he said cautiously, I wanted to inform you that the Historical Board is honoring you at a public ceremony next week. They're naming the new archival wing after you. My heart swelled with disbelief. After me? He chuckled. Yes, after you. Your work has not only helped preserve the past, it's also inspired future generations. You'll be giving a short speech, of course. A speech. The thought terrified me. Not because of the crowd, but because I knew that if Ethan came, he would finally learn the truth, the secret I had carried for over 40 years. The day of the ceremony arrived. The hall was filled with scholars, journalists, and former colleagues. The stage lights glowed warmly, but my palms were ice cold. Ethan sat in the front row, smiling proudly at me, completely unaware of what I was about to reveal. When they called my name, the audience stood in applause. I walked slowly to the podium, feeling the weight of time in every step. I looked at Ethan, my son, my greatest joy and my greatest heartbreak, and took a deep breath. I want to thank all of you. I began, my voice trembling slightly, for recognizing my life's work. But tonight I don't want to talk about achievements. I want to talk about truth. The room fell silent. When I was young, I continued, I wasn't just a librarian. I was also a researcher, one who worked secretly with my late husband, Richard Mason, on government preservation projects during the Cold War. We cataloged confidential archives that later became the foundation of the National Historical Record System. But due to legal restrictions, my name was never listed publicly. Everything I built, every innovation, every system existed in silence. Gasps rippled through the audience. Ethan's jaw dropped. I chose to live quietly, I said, tears forming in my eyes, because after my husband died, I wanted to protect Ethan from the attention that might follow. The patents, the recognition, I signed it all away to keep him safe. He grew up never knowing that the woman who tucked him in at night helped build part of this country's archival framework. I paused, my voice breaking. So when I lost my job, when I stood outside my son's house in the rain that night, he thought I was just a poor old woman. But I wasn't angry with him, not anymore. Because I realized something far more important. Who we truly are isn't measured by money, or titles, or recognition. It's measured by how much love we can give, even when the world turns its back. The room erupted in applause. But all I could see was Ethan, frozen in his seat, tears streaming down his face. After the ceremony, he walked up to me slowly, trembling. Mom, all this time you were? I smiled softly, wiping his tears. Just your mother. That's all I ever wanted to be. He shook his head, overwhelmed. You gave everything up for me. And I threw you out like you were nothing. I took his hands gently. And yet you came back. That's what matters. He hugged me then, tighter than he had in years. The kind of embrace that felt like a promise, that the pain had finally turned into understanding. Weeks passed, and life slowly began to settle. Ethan worked tirelessly to rebuild the foundation he had once destroyed. This time it was truly a charity, funding libraries, scholarships and rehabilitation programs for inmates. And every time a check went out, it bore a new name, the Margaret Mason Initiative. One evening, as we sat together by the fireplace, he turned to me with a gentle smile. "Mom, I want to tell your story. Not just as my mother, but as the woman who showed me what redemption really means." I looked at him, my eyes soft with pride. "Then tell it truthfully, Ethan. Tell it with all the pain, all the love, and all the lessons. Because truth, my dear, is the only legacy worth leaving." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I will." Years later, when I grew too old to work, Ethan published a book, The Woman Who Saved History. It wasn't a bestseller, but it didn't need to be. It carried our story of love, betrayal, forgiveness, and rediscovery. Sometimes people stop me in the street calling me Mrs. Mason from the book. They ask if it's true. I smile and say, "Every word." And when I go home at night, I look at the framed photo on my desk of me and Ethan, standing in front of the library that now bears my name, and I whisper a quiet prayer of gratitude. Because even though life broke me once, it also gave me the strength to rebuild. And sometimes the greatest justice isn't revenge. It's becoming the kind of person your pain tried to destroy. So yes, my son once kicked me out after I lost my job. But life has a funny way of teaching lessons. In the end, he learned who I really was, not through anger, not through money, but through truth. And that truth healed us both.